So welcome to the Chiropractic Wealth Summit. And what I want to share with you is the strategies that I used to retire at age 33. And I looked at a lot of different investments and how things work, and I pretty much found that these are the 9 strategies that's the easiest way to get ahead and create financial security and freedom in your life. And ultimately, that's what we're about. You know, your job. So many times chiropractors just focus on their being a chiropractor as opposed to what's the real purpose of a job. It's not for the job itself. The real purpose of the job is to provide a living and a quality of life. And so many people get removed from that concept because they go to school to be a chiropractor, so they get real narrow-minded and think, well, I just have to be a chiropractor and I got to practice all my life. No, you own a business. You don't have to practice at all. If you know how to run your business, you can leverage it off, work part-time, not at all, and you can keep building that business. And that's what we do. So that's what I did. So I had 2 full-time associate doctors, and then I had ended up opening 77 offices in 20 states. And so that is exactly what we're going to be teaching here with the Chiropractic Wealth Summit. So let me go into some of these key concepts right now, okay? Here's 9 categories, and let me just touch on a couple examples here for just a second, all right? What's the very first thing you can do to increase your wealth? And really, when we talk about increasing your wealth, what are we really talking about increasing your wealth for? To create freedom, to create security and freedom. That's the reason we're talking about wealth, okay? So what's the very first thing you can do to increase? What's the easiest thing to do to increase your wealth the fastest? Your knowledge and skill level. Let me give you an example. When we look at a practice, exchanging your time for money, because remember, 85% of the millionaires became millionaires by leveraging time, not by practicing. 14% of the millionaires became millionaires by leveraging money, not by practicing. 1% of the population became millionaires by exchanging their time for money. In other words, working, going into work. And I tell you, when I heard that statistic, that really was a paradigm shift for me, and it really made me look into what I needed to do to leverage time and money, because I knew there was a 99% chance I wasn't going to be a millionaire by just being a chiropractor. And I knew that also. I remember in one of the semesters in chiropractic college, one of the instructors came in and he said, and I'll never forget this, he said, you can make a good income being a chiropractor, but you won't get wealthy unless you know how to invest. And I remember that. And he's exactly right. Because what I found is people can do well, but most people will live up to that lifestyle. They'll buy the big house, all the SUV cars, and they won't have much disposable income at all, and they won't invest in themselves. So they're living a good life, but then they're also stuck in it. They got to make the regular payments, and so that gets to be an issue. But the 4 categories of exchanging your time for money in a business is new business. These are the 4 categories: is new business, that's marketing, patient retention, your fees, and overhead. All of those are profit centers. And there's rules and guidelines that you can maximize each one of those to maximize your time for money. Most small business owners, including chiropractors, never learn those. Never learn it. I don't know if you know it, but only 9% of small business owners make a 6-figure income. Most people think that if you're a small business owner, you're making all kinds of money. No, 9% make a 6-figure income. So most people don't do well. And I don't know if you've seen some of the statistics in chiropractic. The statistics are going down. They just came out like a year or 2 ago. Now, they rated the profession as one of the top 10 professions. Guess what the average income was? $87,000. $87,000. Well, there's a lot of other things you can do in life and make more money than $87,000, okay? And unfortunately, I see that. I see so many chiropractors out there seeing 60 visits a week, 80 visits a week. They're not even maximizing half their potential. I see it all the time. So the very first thing to do to increase your wealth is your practice. Invest in yourself. Increase your knowledge and skill level. Here's why. Let me give you a real quick example. As an example, typically when I work with clients to increase their business, we work with all four of those categories, but we'll start with patient retention. And 92% of my clients that do my patient retention increase their business over $100,000 in 90 days. You've done it, right? You've increased your business over $100,000, right? Just with patient retention, right? You haven't done patient retention. You have. You definitely have. You have. You have. And you have. All my clients in here, my consulting clients, have increased their business over $100,000 in 90 days just from patient education. Now, let's compare that to what kind of investment you would have to do. So if you wanted $100,000 in the bank, right? How much money would you have had to made, or if you wanted to put in the bank, how much money would you have had to make as a chiropractor to have that $100,000 in the bank? $400,000. You'd had to make $400,000 at a 50% overhead. The national average for overhead is 50 to 70%. 50 to 70%. So 400 to give you 200, 200 to give you 100. Now that's just in the bank. Now remember, if I know the skill level of patient education, I can make that $100,000. That's like they'll make $100,000 more a year because their skill level changed. Their knowledge and their skill level changed. So that's $100,000 a year, not one time $100,000. How much money would you have to have earned to have in the bank to make $100,000 a year? How much? A lot. Well, let's see. If you made $8 million, 50% taxes would be $100,000. So $100,000 a year would be 200. Would be, or no, I'm talking about money in the bank that you get interest off that money. Okay. Well, if you make $8 million, 50% tax overhead to get $4 million, 50% taxes to have $2 million, 5% interest rate, right? 50,000. So you'd have to make what? $16 million. You would have to make $16 million at an overhead of 50% to have $8 million, at taxes to have $4 million, at a 5% interest rate. Does that sound right? Are those numbers right?
That's 200,000.
200,000.
Yeah. Okay,
so then it's $8 million, right? 8 million. Okay. So you would have to have made $8 million at 50% overhead to have $4 million, 50% taxes to have $2 million, to get a 5% interest rate on a conservative investment. In other words, you know it's going to be there. Can you even get a 5% return on your investment right now with conservative investments? No. No, you got to go into riskier stuff. Conservative right now, you can get about 2.5%. So if it's 2.5%, you do need to make 16 million. You see that? So what am I trying to point out here? He is going to be able to make $100,000 a year, every year the rest of his life, because his knowledge and skill change with patient education. He's going to be able to do it. Now the bad news, it's limited to him. He has to exchange his time for money to do it. But the good news is, he can now increase his income $100,000 like he did, as opposed to having to work to get $8 million, to have $4 million after overhead, $2 million in the bank at 5% interest rate. What's the likelihood, and how long is it going to take for you to make $8 million in your practice? Now remember, that's 100% of the money going aside too. That's none of that paying for your mortgage or any of your payments or anything else. That's just what we call disposable income. So you'd had to make more to pay for your lifestyle along that whole way, right? So this was a major concept for me. When I learned this concept, I thought, wow, the very first thing to do to increase your income, the quickest and the most, is to maximize your knowledge and your skill. That's the first thing to do. And most chiropractors never maximize their potential in their office. I personally have found that the average chiropractor can see about 200 visits a week emotionally, physically, without being wore out at the end of every day. Well, I used to see 100 patient visits a day and it was miserable. I couldn't sustain that. Physically, you couldn't sustain it. I was just talking to a chiropractor yesterday. Got out of chiropractic after 20 years. He was seeing 300 visits a week because he was physically just killing himself. He was having all kinds of problems. 5 chiropractors that I know that I started practice with, all 5 of them don't practice anymore for one reason. You know why? Health problem. Wrist and back problems. Wrist and back problems. Chiropractors don't understand. You know, you're changing yourself every time you're bending over patients and you're putting your wrist in extension and all these things. You're creating that deformity in yourself. And so anyway, back to the concept, the practice. That's number one. You investing in yourself. So that's the easiest way to increase your income the fastest. So that's patient education. And then once you know educational sales, now you can access the market and get way more patients than you physically can handle. Okay, so that's how you maximize your money in your office for yourself and have a highly profitable business. Versus how much money you'd have to have made for it to go in the bank for you to have $100,000 a year. So the first thing you always do is invest in yourself. That's why. It's much easier. But guess what most people will do? They'll think they can invest in something else to make them rich. That's what they think. They don't think it's them. What's the national average of patient visits in chiropractic? Do you guys know? Last I saw was 105 visits. 105 visits a week. That's half the potential. Do you know how much money chiropractors lose by not even... the analogy that I give, it's just like an airplane or a hotel. When you are not maximizing your potential in that office every day, and like I said, I found it's about 200 visits a week, about 180 to 220 is what I found, depending on, your style and all kinds of, but I found emotionally, physically, and that's somebody who knows what they're doing, who knows how to keep patients, who knows how to get patients, in other words, has the ability, the knowledge, okay? Most chiropractors don't have the ability. They don't have the knowledge and the skill. So, 200 visits. And most chiropractors are seeing 80, 120 visits a week, right? So they're going through that whole week. Half full. Half full. So how much money is that chiropractor losing? By not maximizing his potential in his office that day. It's just like an airplane that takes off half full. Or it's just like a hotel room that's half full overnight. It just lost a tremendous amount of revenue. See, these were concepts I knew. This was on my mind, and so many chiropractors are seeing like 80, 100 visits a week. They're not even maximizing their potential, and they're playing on Facebook. I'm like, you're kidding me. You know how much it's costing you to play on Facebook? Hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars over your lifetime. Millions.